but obviously they all can't be the Zodiac.
When a strange Zodiac postcard was sent to the press in 1971, retired police detective Harvey Hines found clues that he believes identify the killer.
It had a picture overpasted on the card, and the picture was an artist's rendition of a ski lodge with a person with a shovel digging a sidewalk off.
It was a picture of a condominium project that had recently been finished in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. On this postcard were pasted little phrases like "peek through the pines" and "sought victim 12."
Donna Lass was a 25-year-old nurse living in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. On September 6, 1971, Lass left her place of work, never to be seen again. Her car was left at her apartment, and nothing was missing.
The only murder they thought the postcard could be making reference to was the unsolved murder of Donna Lass, which had taken place, I believe, almost half a year earlier.
Convinced that Lass was the Zodiac's victim 12, in 1973, Hines began his own investigation.
I went to Tahoe, and I questioned the people that worked with Donna Lass and asked them if there was anyone that they could remember that was odd or different than the rest of the employees. Without exception, they named Larry Kane. To them, he was a loner, he was strange, he lived with his mother.
The Zodiac profile indicated a grudge against law enforcement, as well as a military background. According to Hines, Kane fits the profile.
His criminal history, I found, dated back to 1946 and had an entry almost yearly until 1968. Larry Kane, in fact, was in the Navy Reserve in 1943, at which time he went to radio school. He was exposed to some basic semaphore signals and codes.
Hines learned that in the area of San Francisco where Kane had lived, there was a long-running production of the Mikado, which was referred to in many of the Zodiac's letters. Also, in a 1970 letter, the Zodiac indicated that a single line of code would reveal his identity. Hines believes it implicates Kane.
The four letters, K-N-E-A, spell the name Kane. And that's the only spelling you can get out of those four letters, no matter how you run them around. The circle dates to the left of the letters in the symbol merely meant to substitute the eighth letter to the left of the existing one.
Hines found that the letter M changed to an E to form the word name.
I still had a circle 8 in the symbol, the upside-down area symbol. So I felt that that was probably symbolic of the Zodiac chart or calendar. And by starting at the end and going 8 to the left was the sign of Taurus.
After concluding that the message indicated the killer's astrological sign, Hines added the 3 8s to get 24.
Well, 24 couldn't have been his age because he had been described 40 to 45 years old. So possibly it was his birth date, the year he was born.
The single line of code was written backward from right to left, providing a final clue for Hines.
Hebrew language reads from right to left, so I felt possibly this would be his ethnic background.
Hines compared the deciphered clues to information he had gathered about Larry Kane. Kane was born in 1924 under the sign of Taurus, and he was of Jewish descent.
So everything that was in the code matched Kane, the suspect, 100%.
Convinced that Donna Lass was a Zodiac victim, Hines re-examined the postcard for clues to the whereabouts of her body. He noticed a hole punched in the top right corner of the card and thought it could be a clue.
It said go past the Lake Tahoe areas, meaning ski areas, to the areas near the Sierra Club. And I felt it was in that area that we might locate her.
He discovered a strange configuration of rocks in a wooded area by the Sierra Club. The hole in the card matched this location in the woods.
What led me to this site was a circle of logs. They were 16 foot in diameter, Within the circle of logs was a square, and within the square was a triangle, and within the triangle was a 13-stone cross lying flat on the ground. All of the symbols, the circle, the square, the triangle, and the cross, were symbols that the Zodiac used in his coded messages.
Hines began digging at the site, but never did find a body.
Donna Lass's body has never been recovered, and people are still searching for it today. Harvey Hines was out there with the shovel just as recently as 3 or 4 months ago, looking for her body.
Police questioned Kane, but did not believe there was enough physical evidence to make an arrest.
So I've personally spoken to Harvey Hines' suspect. Again, the suspect we're talking about didn't make any incriminating statements. He's one of these dozen or so people that has, for whatever reason, a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing towards him. You know, there's a lot of people that fit that criteria.
Hines is not the only one studying the individual Zodiac letters, ciphers, and cards for anything that might lead to a suspect. Gareth Penn, a scholar in historical linguistics, was drawn into the Zodiac mystery when he saw a 1971 letter containing a reference to radians. A radian is a term used by engineers and mathematicians to denote the angle of 57.3 degrees.
It was rather odd that something of this nature would appear in a letter such as that written by the Zodiac. He had mentioned the word radian, which is not in the active vocabulary of 99% of the U.S. population.
By looking at every letter and murder from the radian theory, a sinister plan unfolds. Penn calls his theory the calculus of evil.
The Zodiac sent a map of the San Francisco Bay Area to police that had a crossed circle drawn over Mount Diablo, which is a mountain right there in the Bay Area. And he said that police would find something interesting if they were to place a radian angle on the peak of Mount Diablo. Apparently, nobody ever tried to find out what a radian was, and this, of course, wasn't uncovered until 1980 when Gareth Penn took it upon himself to do this test and found out that what the Zodiac was talking about was actually something that had a basis in fact. The scenes of the Blue Rock Springs shootings and the shooting of Paul Stine, when they are connected to Mount Diablo, form one radian angle.
Penn's theory may explain why the Zodiac chose to kill cab driver Paul Stine.
Well, he was looking for what you might call a sacrifice at a particular location. And the surest way to get a victim to a particular location is to hire a cab driver, because a cab driver will go wherever you want him to go for the implied promise of payment. Except when they got to the end of this trip.
When the Zodiac's 2 attacks in Vallejo, California, Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs are connected by the point where the Zodiac made his first phone call to police, an angle of 57.3 degrees appears, another perfect radian angle.
I would say that the map references in the Zodiac case are probably the most interesting clues there are, because it's the only real thing that we have that gives us any real indication of why he might have been doing these things, or at least not why, but what it meant to him.
One of the Zodiac's earlier letters had a number of X's marked onto the symbol that was his usual signature. The placement of the X's seemed to be random, but perhaps it wasn't.
When I first received this letter, I had it copied onto a piece of acetate so that it would be clear, and I took it and placed it over a map of San Francisco. I affixed the center point of the cross circle on the peak of Mount Diablo and continued to rotate the piece of acetate around until each one of these little X's on the circumference of the circle lined up with a scene relevant in the Zodiac case. Here's Mount Diablo. Here's the scene of the murder of Paul Stine at Washington and Cherry in San Francisco. If you look here, here are the scenes of the Lake Herman and Blue Rock Springs shootings, lined up perfectly with Mount Diablo. If I move this around some more, you'll see that the third X here lines up with Lake Berryessa.
And the patterns don't stop there.
There was something else that had occurred not only to me but also to the police and any number of people, and that was the role of water in the entire Zodiac episode. The first murder was in Riverside. There was one committed at the water's edge at Lake Berryessa, Lake Herman Road. In fact, when I went to look at the site where the cab driver was murdered, it was right next to a fire hydrant. So the thought passed through my mind that water might be a clue to his identity.
This connection to water led Penn to a suspect he is convinced is the Zodiac. Because the man has not been officially questioned by police, he will remain nameless. But according to Penn, he's an Ivy League lecturer and brilliant mathematician who planned that every letter and every murder follow a pattern of numbers and angles, creating a legacy of evil genius.
So many suspects, so many theories, one weirder than the next.
Was Arthur Lee Allen the Zodiac Killer?
No, I'm certainly, most certainly not the Zodiac Killer.
Was it Larry Kane, an unnamed Ivy League lecturer? Or could there have been more than one killer?
It seems to me that we have here a series of disparate crimes that don't have much in common aside from the fact that the same person has taken credit for all of them. We do know that one person wrote all of the letters. We also know that the letters were written by someone with insider's knowledge of the crime. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the person who wrote the letters committed all of those crimes. It strikes me as possible, for example, that he might have found someone to do his work for him, employed a sort of cat's paw to act on his behalf. This would help explain the anomaly of the murder of the cab driver, Paul Stein, where Zodiac clearly claimed credit for it, yet left physical evidence that did not fit any of the suspects. The handprint clearly was left by someone other than any of the people that the police picked up. Now, if Zodiac simply observed that crime, or actually sent someone to commit it on his behalf, that would explain the lack of physical evidence.
But who and why?
Well, let's say Arthur Lee Allen was in Riverside and for one reason or another killed Sherry Joe Bates. He learned two things from this. One was that it didn't bother him to kill, that he might in fact even have enjoyed it. He also found out that he enjoyed writing about it, and that he enjoyed the credit he got for it, even though it was anonymous, and thus he might want to have that happen again. Then a certain amount of time after having killed Sherry Joe Bates, it seems to me that one of two things would have happened. Either he found himself in a position to commit another murder, or he observed or learned about another murder and decided to take credit for it.
This is the Zodiac speaking. The police shall never catch me because I have been too clever for them. I look like the description passed out only when I do my thing. The rest of the time, I look entirely different. I shall not tell you what my disguise looks like when I kill.
Murder will out, they say. You can't get away with murder. That's true in the books I write, where dumb luck or brilliant deduction nails the killer in the last chapter. In the real world, it doesn't always work out that way. Some killers are acquitted. Others are never even arrested, never found out. Zodiac got away with murder. Or did he? Maybe the final chapter